Hello everyone, my name is Roger Strasser. I'm the Dean and the CEO of the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, and I'm speaking to you today from Toowoomba in Queensland, Australia. I'm here actually at the offices of the Rural Clinical School of the University of Queensland, and I'm here today to introduce Dr. Denis Lennox. Denis has just retired from a long career with Queensland Health, and he was, when he retired, the Director of Rural and Remote Medical Services for the state of Queensland. And during his time with Queensland Health, he oversaw the development and implementation of the Rural Generalist program in Queensland. So we're here with Denis and looking to learn from his experience and what we might be able to learn from Queensland that is relevant and important to Ontario, and particularly to Northern Ontario. I'm going to start off with a question to Denis, which is about, well, the value and the importance of generalism in remote and rural health services, with an emphasis on the breadth of services provided and involving health teams in the communities.
Let's begin by first examining the nature of rural remote services, upon which the answer to this question depends. What I would describe as both looking at the anatomy and the physiology of remote and rural medical services. So firstly, rural and remote communities are by definition small in population. That small population implies that the services provided are small. They're inherently small, and the workforce providing those medical services are inherently small. There's a problem of being small, and that problem is the risk of fragility. As the size decreases, fragility increases. This is the physiology, if you like, of small rural remote services. The converse is true, of course, as well. So if population increases, service increases, workforce size increases, so the fragility of the service decreases, the fragility of the workforce decreases. So it's fairly obvious then that if we are to ensure flourishing service and flourishing physician workforce in our rural remote communities, then we need to manage that risk. And essential to managing that risk is maximising the capacity of the services and of the workforce. In our experience here, there are probably about 7 critical elements through which a common theme threads, and that is joined up or joining up. And crucial then to ensuring we have flourishing medical service in our remote and rural communities is joining up the skills required of the physicians that practice in those communities. And so you can see that if we introduce specialised practice into our rural remote communities, particularly if we have residential specialist practice, so this is acknowledging our communities need specialised service, but if that specialist service becomes residential, it fractures, it silos the service organisation and the workforce and increases risk to the workforce. So it's therefore crucial for flourishing service in our communities to have a generalist discipline bespoke to the needs of the communities in practice. The scope of that practice needs to address the full range of primary care required in all settings in the communities, as well as providing hospital care, in-hospital care, if the communities indeed have a hospital. And crucial to that consideration is the need to ensure that the service expands to 24/7. So providing a workforce with the skills not only in primary care but in secondary care. And there's a distinct advantage as well if that scope of practice involves specialised practice bespoke to the needs of the community.
Can you describe the rural generalist training pathway through each stage of the education and training and transition into practice with interprofessional healthcare teams?
So the pathway in Queensland, or the supply line in Queensland, is built upon a critical infrastructure or framework, if you wish. The first is the definition and recognition of a discipline of rural generalist medicine. This was absolutely crucial in attracting or interesting medical students, even secondary school students, in a potential career in practice in remote and rural communities. The second crucial element of the framework was the valuing of that practice for its true worth to the state, to the province, to the regions. And thirdly was the need to ensure that there was a rematching of community need and expectation of its medical services to the capacities and aspirations of the next generations of rural doctors tracking through this pathway, through this supply line. So against that framework, the very first element is early recruitment. And by early recruitment we mean in medical school and in fact in some instances back further into secondary school, particularly knowing that there's a direct relationship between the living heritage of practitioners, in other words those who have a rural heritage more frequently will accept or commit to practicing a rural location and do so enthusiastically. So there's an important consideration to ensuring that there's a good representation, a proportional representation of young people from a rural and remote background tracking into medical school in the very first instance. And then as early as possible in medical school, identifying those who have the capacity, the interest, the commitment, and who are prepared for the preparation required to track a pathway into practice in a generalist discipline in rural medicine. A next crucial consideration is to ensure that they are able to pass through the necessary medical school training, postgraduate experience in the fastest, safest track to get them early as possible in their career into remote and rural practice. This is absolutely crucial from the point of view of all of the potential diversions, distractions if you wish, and it's crucial that there's an early as possible entry into rural and remote practice in the career. Of course it needs to be safe entry. At the time that the graduates in medicine of the medical school are tracking into a rural and remote location, they need to be both competent and confident of their practice. So safety is a crucial consideration. Nevertheless, against the balance of the assurance of safety, a fast track is essential. There needs to be a privileged pathway. The system needs to be designed to ensure that those who are making this commitment receive privileged access to the necessary postgraduate training elements to get them to that desired end. And finally, it's absolutely crucial, given the range of issues which will impact upon an individual's personal life, family life, career, it's absolutely crucial that the pathway maximises career options. In other words, it is quite detrimental if not only there is an appearance, but the reality is that someone tracking down this pathway, if they find for whatever reasons they can't continue in practice in a rural location, they're out of options. So it's absolutely crucial that this is a pathway which is full of options. At any point, the individual can divert off into a different career course.
So how do you develop service models and build a culture of addressing community health needs and strong active community participation?
This is a crucial consideration of the whole rural generalist transformation. The need to ensure that there is community participation and that there is a good match between the community's need and the expectations of the community against the capacities and the aspirations of the workforce which is supplying the services in that community. The crucial commencing point is probably at provincial level, requiring bipartisan or at least non-partisan support for the need to maintain flourishing medical service in our remote and rural communities. This needs to be based on justice and equity considerations relating to health service provision as well as health status of the community. It's importantly based on economic considerations, not only in relation to the service provided, but the economy of those communities as well. It's probably worthwhile just identifying here, our personal view is that the future economic development of our remote and rural communities is directly dependent upon the provision of medical services in those communities. And we can see significant lost opportunity of economic benefit to the whole state in failure to consider this in terms of the provision of medical services to our remote and rural communities. Thirdly, there's need then for a systematic evidence-based consideration of the safety tension between small volume medical practice, which is the problem of being small, and the risk of acting solely on that issue and therefore reducing accessibility of services into the community. The risks of accessibility are personal, they're family, and particularly if individuals in the family need to depart from the community to access services, significant disruption to the family unit, significant disruption to the economic viability of that family, significant impact upon the economic viability of the community as a whole, and then there's the lost economic development, lost economic opportunity for regions as a consequence. So it's crucial that our politicians and leaders of services are able to comprehensively consider the balance required between those two safety considerations. Health system leadership support is required critically to accomplish this. And then we need to build, recruit and develop health service leadership capacity or capability to be able to best manage the small volume, small size medical workforce. Collating demographic and health service information, identifying both the strengths, weaknesses and gaps in services is absolutely crucial at this point. And then follows, based upon all of those foundations, a careful redesign or design of service and workforce systematically in response to the fragility dynamic. Joining up 7 areas of crucial consideration for flourishing services. Joining up services geographically, joining up skills in a single generalist discipline, joining up a supply line. We refer to it in Queensland as a grow our own workforce strategy. Joining up service and workforce across healthcare sectors, remembering that any fracture or siloing increases fragility risk. Joining up service and workforce across providers and stakeholders. It's crucial in small communities that we have one medical service, regardless of the number of providers and other stakeholders involved. Joining up service and workforce in a genuinely multidisciplinary team operation. And finally, all of those 6 joining up processes are sewn together, stitched together by the final element, which is joining up a single medical record for that community. This provides the essential systematic framework in which we can see that question answered.
Please describe the process of adapting rural primary care services to meet community need and attract recent medical graduates.
So it's crucial in this process that this is not imposed upon a local community. Local initiative is necessary. It may be prompted, and very frequently in Queensland we've done this, prompting at local community level, local government level, other key organisations. We simply need a couple of key leadership positions to see the vision and then to promulgate the concept across others. So there is crucially a need for significant local capacity in vision, expectation and effort to get the whole transformation moving ahead. So it's then necessary to secure leadership commitment. That's both within the local community but within the services provided the community. This is the point at which these two really need to come together in concept. Gathering and analysing crucial demographic and health service data needs to proceed at this stage in collaboration with the local community, and particularly consultation with community leadership relating to the current provision of services, the current expectation, the access of services, and future potential opportunities. Local government's crucial, local government organisations are crucial. Voluntary organisations are important to consult at this stage, but particularly the police service and ambulance service and school services. These provide a crucial and valuable input to the process. Developing service and workforce design options then can proceed in collaboration with these community partners, remembering the smallest fragility dynamic, considering both the current status of the workforce and the disposition of the service. So it's important that we start with what we have now and move forward from that point, and then looking forward to future service and workforce objectives. Testing those design options with local leadership is crucial, providing feedback to the community on the agreed strategy, and then finally implementing and reviewing against the objectives which have been agreed.
Please set out the short, medium and long-term stages in the process of developing sustainable service models for flourishing communities, and are there any interim solutions that should be considered?
This is a complex consideration, an absolutely vital question. But it's the point at which I believe there are many initiatives to address the inherent fragility of remote and rural services, and they have not been sustained. It does require a long-term strategy. The long-term objectives, in my mind, are necessarily set at provincial level, and they must address the unjust and inequitable gap in health status between remote and rural communities and those in large population centres. This requires a systematic approach which firstly recognises the fragility dynamic that we've described previously that exists in remote and rural communities. Secondly, it needs to recognise the necessity to balance those safety considerations. So frequently at provincial level, state level, we've had significant responses to the question of small medical service volume safety questions, and they've resulted in service closure, massive extra difficulties in access to services for our residents in rural and remote communities. So at that level we need the politicians, the system leadership, our provincial system leadership, to understand the crucial need to balance the small volume question against the safety issues realised when you increase inaccessibility to services. That will result in a special attention being given to our rural remote services and a focus on managing their risk at that level. Embedding the transformative elements within that are required for remote and rural medical services within the health system itself is absolutely crucial. So our experience has been, after decades of add-ons, a patchwork of initiatives designed to redress the rural situation, change of ideology, change of government, change of leadership, they quickly are shed. What we need is a system that is designed to ensure it maintains its services in rural remote communities. So the reform needs to be embedded within the crucial elements of that system, within its clinical practice systems, within its industrial systems. That's absolutely crucial. Then it requires service accountability. So at provincial level, accountability is required to the communities for the services or the transformation which is going to proceed. And that accountability needs to be rendered back to the community as well. This all requires, at provincial level, a collaborative approach involving medical schools, health services, the medical profession's representative organisations, community organisations, and all the relevant tiers of government. The short and medium-term strategies, I believe, are particularly in the hands of physicians and their health professional colleagues, as well as clinical and business leadership of local health services, including medical schools, the medical profession and representative organisations. And this leadership is crucial, firstly, to facilitate the change of community and health service leadership and physician expectation of remote and rural service and workforce. Because of its inherent fragility and because of a lack of good leadership in many instances, remote and rural services frequently languish or fail. And this has resulted in an insidious passive resignation to service and workforce inferiority. I've dubbed this in Queensland the inferiority syndrome. In other words, rural remote equals failing or inferior service. And this is associated with a passive and neglectful acceptance of missionaries, miscreants, misfits and malevolence in our services, what I refer to as the 4M syndrome. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost in this context. So that cultural stance, that cultural status is best challenged by physicians, rural remote physicians and leaders of local rural remote services themselves. Leadership then is necessary to risk manage the inherent fragility of the service and ensure it flourishes, maximising and building capacity, minimising service volume, optimising clinical and business models and planning and transforming systematically. Physician leaders, in effect every rural generalist, has a role to play within their communities and health services in leading population health approach to redress health status, but in developing a high level of skill and risk management of their inherently fragile service as well. So there are a range of initiatives which can be taken at local level, which will hopefully facilitate the actions required at regional and provincial level as well.
Well, what are the key lessons from Queensland for Ontario?
I think the very first is that it's a long-haul project. This is not something which will be accomplished in a short period of time. We've still not completed the work. There is still much to be gained in Queensland in 2017 for a project which commenced in 2002. So it's a long-haul project. Secondly, the project requires elevation beyond political ideology to receive bipartisan, non-partisan political support. This has been absolutely crucial. The project needs to survive the fluctuations and cycles in our political system. It needs to be systematic, embedding the transformative change required within the health system, the provincial health system, as we've discussed before. And then redressing concurrently the 4 elements which seem necessary to its success. Our judgment is that those 4 elements are just as relevant in the Ontario situation as they have been in Queensland. That's defining and recognising the discipline required, a bespoke discipline to the needs of our remote and rural communities. Secondly, valuing that discipline, the practice in that discipline for its true worth to the community. That's not just about dollars, it's about the culture of our medical profession, which provides equivalent esteem to practice in remote and rural locations as it does to highly subspecialised practice. Developing a supportive pathway and supply line from medical school through to masterful practice within the discipline. And the 4th element, as we've been describing at length, redesigning a remote and rural service to rematch the needs of the community to the capacities of the workforce coming through.
How important is it to have government buy-in, and what does government buy-in look like?
So it's absolutely crucial to have government buy-in to a rural generalist transformation. After all, provincial government is responsible for the provision of health services and to its community and responsible for the health status of its community. As we've previously described, A real generalist transformation, a successful real generalist transformation, requires an embedding of the transformation into the key system, the essential system, a health system of the province. So government commitment to it is absolutely essential. And what it looks like when it's accomplished is government being convinced of the value proposition of a real generalist transformation, of being prepared to make the necessary investment, being prepared for a long haul project as required to see the outcomes achieved. But particularly crucial is a preparedness to give accountability back to the communities to ensure that they have flourishing medical services.
Well, thank you, Denis. This has really been wonderful. I'm sure there's a lot that we can learn from Queensland, and I really want to thank you for taking the time today and to share your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you.